I'm just gonna check, and so it's live now. So if you go over to my page,
I'm on it.
yeah, you can retweet it. Just
All right, let's hit it.
all right.
Done.
Let's do it. All right. Welcome everyone to Beyond the Blocks. Very excited to be here. I'm your host, Raven. I'm here with the legend, Jack Butcher, and he has a project tomorrow that's already started, actually, with a Mint Zero, actually, being auctioned off. I don't never heard that happen before in the history of Art Blocks. And then also a very unique mechanic for tomorrow for the remaining pieces that is sure to bring a lot of chaos. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know we were just talking before the show kicked off. Jack's on a little bit of a media tour here. I think everyone's really excited for this project, especially the fact that, it's the second to last release of kind of to cap off the Art Blocks 500, which has been celebrated. Maybe we just start off by saying, like, what is your, you obviously have followed Art Blocks for a while, and this is your first release on Art Blocks. What do you think of Art Blocks in the crypto art ecosystem, and also doing a generative art project, right?
Yeah, so I've been a huge admirer and collector of Art Blocks projects for the last, what is it now, 4 years, almost 5 years. And when I started in this world, like my introduction and the first stuff that I ever minted was just images that I'd made that I was already producing on all of these digital platforms. And actually, in a couple of my previous jobs, in when I was working in the design world, I would get into these like rabbit holes around processing and a couple of the early programming languages, and I had zero technical ability to produce those things at the time, but I was always sort of fascinated with it, and it clicks obviously immediately when you have those two ingredients, the idea of finite ownership and the outputs of an algorithm. But it wasn't something that I had my sights set on at that moment in time whatsoever when I started out in 2021, because I didn't think of visualized value as that kind of art practice initially, and it took a few iterations of these outputs and the scale of these different collections to start to appreciate what the surface area of a collection could actually, the second and third order effects of that. And some of those were initially open editions and have now become these more interactive, quote unquote, generative projects, because they have these random qualities that are informed by, they are like truly random inputs that create these unique objects. So yeah, always been a huge admirer and didn't think of myself as a, Art Blocks curated artist per se, just because the vast majority of the works in there like differ quite significantly from the stuff I was doing. But this idea specifically, in fact, I'm going outside of the bounds of the original question, but that's the up until very recently that was my thinking.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, have you found that developing this project in particular with generative art and kind of dealing with that randomness has changed your way of approaching a project? And the fact that, that randomness is passed in on chain when, at min time. So, you're ceding some control, right?
Yeah, I think
How has that been?
Yeah, I think I love I've always been attracted to this idea of like designing a system, even before I knew what any of this stuff was, is like you build these brands from scratch and you set rules and you have like relationships between one component and another. I was also hugely into these like collecting games, I guess, earlier in my life, the schoolyard pogs and marbles and Pokemon and
Oh, yeah.
just love that stuff, trading cards, football cards. And there's some so like innately interesting about collecting, and when a collectible is designed really well, it's I mean it's, I don't even know how to put it into words, but when you look at something like a CryptoPunks or a Chromie Squiggles, it's like the way the distribution is done in this has just created this just incredible system where you have these harder to reach pieces, you have like this layer of unifying pieces that are more accessible than this top tier. It's not, and that creates these like systems and infrastructures and relationships between people and the object. And like I was learning a lot just from watching these things either be deployed or be traded or understood like secondhand. And a lot of that just like becomes this, you know, secondhand instinct. I think when you see a really well designed collection, how those variables have been laid out. I think in some cases maybe like a it's people operating on instinct, and then those things hit the market and they just are constructed in the right way and get their own momentum for that
Yeah,
reason.
I think it's really interesting that you're bringing in, again, like you're bringing community and you're bringing in systems, and you know that's something that I've seen looking at your work, back to checks, back to all your projects, seem to have an element of community and also of these systems, like of either you know, collecting, like you're saying, like you're composing different mints together to make to kind of to build a larger mint, or you know, you're allowing your collectors to be part of that creative journey with you. I really, that's something I've really admired about your work, is that, you know, when I say of think of artists that have truly embraced the blockchain medium, I think you're atop of that list, right? Um, and what made you think of or a desire to kind of create art in this way that's not only like aesthetically like in one way, but actually a lot of the art is in this almost game theory and community participation and like deep use of blockchain mechanics, right?
Yeah, I think it's one is a genuine fascination with it. Is just like a tinkering thing, and is like as you're describing it, I'm thinking how to answer that question. It's like kind of a pragmatic thing. It's like, how do you people care about this? Like, what can you do to make this interesting enough that people want to come back and play with it and influence it and like even read what you have to say about it next, you know, as opposed to coming to the market with one tweet and being like, this is my thing, like, leave it, come back and look at it whenever you want. I think it's, you know, there's certainly people who can make images that are that captivating, and there are examples of that, but that's not me. I think the idea that you could just create this scaffolding for an idea that people can contribute to, and in varying degrees, I think we have a good mix of that too. Like some of these systems are like they have a lot of rigor and there is randomness, but you know, it's bound randomness. And
Yeah.
then there are other projects. Opepin is maybe the most outside of those bounds, where it's like it can kind of stretch as far as people are willing to take it. It does have like this governance boundary around it that prevents those things maybe becoming like immortally part of it, but
Yeah.
it can hold anything. And I think that that's like as you sort of push up against the edges of this stuff, and as you like learn how the networks work, and I think the couple of years that I was doing stuff outside of this world just on social media exclusively sort of gives you a little bit of a sense or an instinct of like what has inherent momentum, what is shareable, what people in like tend to want to amplify or not. And that is, you know, layered on top of this concept of people can actually own these objects. It just like the design space just goes ballistic from that point. And like even when I first started playing around with this stuff, I had no idea of the potential, and obviously have to give a lot of credit to people I've collaborated with on helping me like stretch that technically too. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's just it's an incredible design space, and it feels even like we're only really like at this very like immature implementation
Yeah.
of it.
No, 100%. I agree. And I think it's pretty amazing, the medium. And I feel like, you're right. We barely embraced it so far. I think one thing about this that I think is interesting, because, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, is um, about scarcity versus abundance. I think is really interesting. You're another artist that, along with Snowfra, I would say, there's a few artists in this space that really embrace abundance. And what I mean by that is, I think that the conventional wisdom sometimes is that you would have, um, you basically would have you have to control your supply basically. Jack, did we lose you? One second. May have lost Jack here. We'll try to get him back. We're doing this live. One second. Try to get Jack back in here.
Was that me?
Yes, you're back. Great.
I'm back. I switched
We're
to the
doing this
hotspot.
live. That's the beauty of live, right? So that's what happens. But the question was, what I was bringing is that I was just saying that you and Snowfro are kind of, some of the two artists that I really think embraces abundance mindset, which I also agree with. And I think, meaning that traditionally kind of artists are told to constrain your supply and like, you should only do so many outputs or something like that. You want almost go for like maximum value and fewer outputs, right? Rather than having a bunch of low cost outputs or NFTs, etc. And I think I personally agree, like that's backwards. I think especially in this medium, because the medium and that may make sense for when you're painting something and you actually have a lot of work that goes into it, right? And there is some physical labor constraints, but in a digital environment like this where there is no of those constraints, like why does that make sense, right? I don't know how you think of this, but it's something that I definitely notice you leaning into.
Yeah, I think there's like there are realities that exist in the perception of stuff, and something about the finite nature is, I think, appealing to participants. I also think that the discernment of collectors is higher than people give them credit for a lot of the time, where it's like you can have an ecosystem which has artwork in it that costs 50 cents and $100,000 or whatever the spread is. It's like
Yeah,
if you just become comfortable with that idea, I think that's part of it, right? And be transparent about your approach, in that I think it's reasonably obvious at this point that visualized value more broadly is like we will just continue making these experiments in order to like make the body of work
yeah,
altogether way more relevant. That's the goal, right? It's like
definitely.
more people participate, more people want to own this stuff. And obviously it has to grow at a pace where more people want to own it than it is available. That's true, but the balance there is the amount of objects that can be owned are contributing to the communication of the story itself. And even if you think about where we are right now, it's like how many serious participants are even here?
Not many.
It's in the hundreds, I would think, in the
Yeah,
hundreds. And a lot of these collections are still sustaining just incredible value, unbelievable
yeah,
value relative to like an illiquid art market anywhere else. I feel like the maturity of this is really, there's a bizarre mismatch, honestly. Like
yeah.
it's kind of fascinating to me.
it's also too, you think of like the thing I think of is think how many people out there have never collected art, any piece of art, right?
Mm-hmm.
From an artist. Like they just buy things at, in the States, Home Goods or
Mm-hmm.
IKEA, or, that's the only experience they have with art is like that. And because maybe that's all they can afford, or, maybe they just don't have any knowledge. But I just see this whole, like, we're at like first inning, like
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
can, this medium has the ability to really turn a lot of people who would never collect art into art collectors, right? If this ecosystem continues to grow, the UX gets a little bit better. I mean, there's a lot of people that are never going to remember their seed phrase, et cetera, right? So
Yeah, and I would
yeah.
say on the other side of that equation, it's like turn the most amount of people that would never sell art into artists.
Yeah.
You know, like that like the supply side is crazy too. And I think that that's a really misunderstood part of this, and a lot of it is downstream of the like 2021 mania, right? Where
Yeah.
if I'm not selling work for multiple seven figures every other day, I'm not a successful artist. It's like
Yeah.
that the fact that you could collect any capital for something that you would
Yeah.
have done for free is like a crazy quantum leap in career. And I think that idea that, and I guess you can oversimplify this too, but the vast majority of people I've seen approach this stuff with that attitude is just far more sustainable, both like financially and mentally, right? And
Yes.
as opposed to the golden handcuffs of I had this incredibly crazy outlier of a result in 2021, and now I'm just completely paralyzed and frozen, and I have to
Yeah.
make sure the next thing I do exceeds that at the very least. And it's like it's just not possible at this point. Like the
Yeah.
literal economics of it do not work out in that in your favor. But the idea that you can build a body of work and build relationships with the people who are like sticking it out in the most irrational of times, right? When this
Yes.
stuff is largely written off, and even the institutional interest, like people winding down their auction houses, and to me, it's just like it's never been more obvious that it has longevity in a weird way because
Yeah.
of like the irrationality of the small base of people that are just like, well, I can't imagine doing anything else. This is my thing.
Yeah, I was there before 2021. And I think, now, and it's actually like, 2021 obviously and 2022 were crazy. And, I think a lot of us benefited financially from that and released work during that time. So I think it was a very important time for the space. And, I think very thankful, like, to that time for sure. But
Oh yeah.
also, I think, um, the people that have stuck around, the people that were here before 2021, I think it just having those people around it leads to a much more, I think, sustainable culture. And also it's people that are genuinely kind of here for the art and here for the experience, and tend to be less that are gonna complain because they didn't get a 2x the next day after your project, like
Yeah, I think I think that just from that perspective of like as an artist, like trying to build a practice, it's much it's a much healthier environment in some ways, and a much less healthy environment in other ways, like if you look at the pure economics of it. But the the ability to try things, make things, put stuff out into the world, and largely be received as you know people interested in your craft, as opposed to viewing you as a vehicle for their very short term benefit, is different now. And like don't get me wrong, that relationship is what makes this stuff, what makes the world go round more generally, and what makes this
Yeah.
interesting on another layer. That's not, I'm not, it's not me denouncing that. It's just like FOMOing in as a practitioner into a moment that is clearly driven by like the madness of crowds is very
Yeah.
different than like getting curious about something outside of that bubble and then beginning to practice it in a way that like you build this like set of artifacts that embodies your fascination with it, that largely done well will compound in positive ways.
Yeah. And I want to now turn to kind of the project Gas Wars that you're releasing this week. And I think on that note, what you're saying is something that I've noticed with a lot of your projects as well is they can be a little complex. And I mean that in a good way. Like a lot of rules, a lot of you know, like mechanics, different mechanics that people really have to kind of dig in. It's not a Fidenza where it's just okay, here's a Fidenza, buy it or not, right? Like it's you know, it looks like it's only the aesthetics of it, right? Which is awesome, but you know, that's what you're buying. With your work, it's like people getting value out of it. You know, you got to dig deeper. It's not like you said before, just the aesthetics. It's the whole system behind it, the game theory, and just almost like this for this one, like a circus, right? That you've created and kind of loaded up now to be unleashed tomorrow. You know, and I can tell that you get a lot of joy kind of out of that, which is awesome. I'm similar that way of like designing the system. So maybe just tell us a little bit about this project and what kind of led you to lean into the chaos a little bit around it.
Yeah, so I always been fascinated with the survivorship bias concept since the early days of VV, where I'll be digging for all of these like mental models and ideas that you know, help you understand reality a little better, and like like a personal journey for me was just like these things I found useful or interesting. I would sort of put them through the filter of the visualization. How do you take this quote that's particularly powerful and turn it into an image? And this was always sort of like hovering around in the background. And the example it was always used for back then was like, you know, here are these people that have made careers of them on the internet, for example, and all the people that have attempted to do that thing but didn't end up in that spot. That's the opposite end of the survivorship bias diagram. So you're evaluating the outlier as the rule rather than the exception. And I think that all of the I've always been obsessed with that idea, but that's not like there's nowhere where that's more true than crypto, right? Hyper financialized, the winners win like crazy, and a technology more generally, like these power laws and outliers are so common. And I had this sketch from 6 months ago, maybe, where I was just trying to update the survivorship bias concept to an aircraft that looked like present day. So the original analogy is about World War II bombers. So it's like, oh, it's just a sort of an update to that idea. And I got talking to Eric a few months ago about maybe doing something to be included before the curated series closes out. It's like, oh, that kind of works. That's interesting. Like, it's the idea that's been rattling around my head for the last few months. And there's probably something cool we could do. But then this idea of gas wars really came in as I think as reference to the Art Blocks Curated history too. You know, there was like insane moments back in 2021 when these collections were minting, and it's like a time capsule that is about to be sealed around this body of work that was around when Ethereum was, you know, really starting to gain traction. So that's one part of it, and then the name update to Gas Wars comes from that largely. And then I think getting into this generative mechanism, to your point, where you have the typical way, or maybe the like layman perception of generative art is, hey, I'm going to create this algorithm that makes these beautiful random objects at varying degrees of frequency. And there are rare ones and there are less rare ones. And as an artist, I'm going to set a cap on how many pieces that is. Maybe 1,000, maybe 100, maybe 10,000. But that's an arbitrary rule that I'm deciding to apply for the most part. Versus how do you use the container of generative art inside a system that is like hyper structured and make these like really obvious relationships between the token and the purchase experience, where instead of having a ranked auction where you randomly distribute 500 pieces, you make the mechanics of the sale explicit references to what's happening in the image itself. So the incremental pricing of a token, $1 is $1. It has one bullet on that canvas generated randomly by that transaction hash, and so on and so forth all the way through the collection is I thought was a cool idea by itself, but in the Art Blocks container gets even more interesting because it's the 500 pieces, because it's referential of even people that have contributed at the highest level of crypto art, you know, are part of this collection that maybe don't practice anymore, maybe haven't put anything out since, or got burned and don't want to return to this world. If this thing can become part of that container, it's kind of you know, over time becomes this ability to tell that story. Like, what gas wars? What does that mean? You know, and it has this like layered meaning that anybody that was participating at this time would be able to tell you what a gas war was, and it's largely a negative experience when it's not explicitly part of the work. It still could be a negative experience. I'm just saying the idea that we're calling it gas wars and trying to be incredibly explicit about the fact that that may be an occurrence
yes
is part of the decisions, that is a very deliberate way to construct the project to sort of tell that story. I think it just all sort of fell together, and all the numeric relationships between the tokens and the mint mechanics, and this zero reserve auction being this like price discovery billboard for 24 hours prior to token 1 going live. And just have to give a massive shout out to Art Blocks teams, all the custom work they did, and Jalil I worked with on the VV side to get everything ready. Just I'm mega excited for this thing to go live tomorrow. Should be fun to watch. One more thing I'll add is the like grid itself is like a meta version of the gas wall, like at a layer above the token itself. So we have all these things in place to record activity beyond just the failed transactions, like where are people's cursors going, how many times are different token IDs getting clicked. And my hope and vision for that is like in post, you can sort of retell that story in real time of where all this, like, you know, the dogfight, the fog of war, the craziness that happens in that small window should be a fun artifact to like layer on top of the set of outputs, however many there might be.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what's going to happen. I think you, again, like this element of chaos, right? As you know, myself released on Art Blocks, the same thing. It's like you're kind of but in this project, it's different because it's not just about the randomness of it, you know, affecting the output and what, oh, did I like, is some randomness going to be coming in here that's going to like make something I don't like? You know, that's what most artists fear on here. But I think in this case, it's not really that. It's like, what is actually going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, is someone going to be able to bot this, you know, and like something is going to be crazy, like that's going to happen? Is someone going to try to, don't get any ideas, like DDoS the site, right? To try to like lock out everyone else and try to go through the contract. Like, you know, there's just so many ways this could go down that it is sure to be a show. And that's, I think, you know, it's performance art. That's what it is. And I love it.
I'm glad you like it. No, I think it's like so much to be celebrated about that too, is like just hyper irrational and fun. And like, man, I really just, the other thing that I've maybe struggled to get perfectly into words is like the trade-offs that exist in not doing this, right? And like, how would you prevent this from happening? You would either choose all the buyers in advance, essentially, which is dull, and just like kills the idea in itself, right? It's like the layer that exists on top of this, I feel like, in the same way any piece of art becomes notable, it is obviously about the artwork itself, but it's about the relationship people have with it and the experience they have surrounding it, the lore around it. And this idea that that there's a like this expression of intent happening at every level, and like people have their own strategies and play this in different ways, and like I assume communication that will go on like privately between people who are trying to figure out what to do is all just like hopefully makes this thing way more memorable.
Exactly. We are at time, so I'm going to let you go. But there is one way that you can guarantee to get an output from this project, and that's to win the Mint Zero auction, right? Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? It's going to be craziness. But if you bid highest on the Mint Zero, you get Mint Zero. So if you want to guarantee yourself an output from this collection, that's the way to do it, right? Win the auction.
Indeed.
Exactly. Jack, thanks for joining. I'm going to be watching tomorrow. Obviously trying to get one. It's going to be crazy. Looking forward to it. Would love to have you back on at some point. You're a great guest, and it's been great talking with you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Thanks for your time.
No problem. All right, later, Jack.
Good luck tomorrow. Me too. I'll be doing
good luck,
thing.
everyone, and thanks for tuning in.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers, mate.
See ya.